You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
What's up, everybody? It's bshowbrian from Halloween 365. So the other day, I was on the Horror Nerd discussion group on Facebook, and a friend of mine, Sam Hoyos of the Red River podcast and the band Playing Dead, brought up an interesting scenario that I think a lot of horror fans would be really excited for. Corey Feldman, 80s child actor extraordinaire, voice of Donatello from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie in 1990, and the guy who played young Tommy Jarvis, who slayed Jason in Friday the 13th Part 4, mentioned a pitch that he had to come back to the franchise for a Jason versus Michael Myers crossover. If that's not bonkers enough, he was also talking about bringing Danielle Harris back to play Jamie Lloyd, who was Michael Myers' niece, who was kind of shoved out of the franchise after playing Michael Myers' niece in Halloween's 4 and 5. And it'd be cool to see her come back in that role, although she did come back in Rob Zombie's version of Halloween. Anyway, back to the topic. Michael Myers versus Jason. I was asked my opinion by Sam. I love the idea of Corey Feldman returning to Friday the 13th as Tommy Jarvis. I'd like to see him as an adult take on Jason because as a kid, there was only so much he could do. I would love to see Danielle Harris come back to the Halloween franchise. I'm not crazy about reintroducing the family angle because it kind of dilutes Michael, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Although I love all of these things individually, I hate the idea of a crossover. Horror crossovers usually tend to be pretty terrible. If you look at the example of Kong versus Godzilla from earlier this year, the fighting was awesome. The story was dog shit. Freddy vs. Jason in 2002 was probably the most, anticipated horror movie of all time. To be fair, I mean, as big as slasher movies were in the 80s, fans of both franchises would say, oh man, Jason would fuck up Freddy, or Freddy would kill Jason. Everyone talked about that. So when the idea in 1987 was first thrown out there, people thought it would be amazing. Unfortunately, 15 years of development later, the movie was pretty shitty. And I think it's, amongst most horror fans, pretty universally accepted as that. So crossovers are generally terrible. They're spectacles, they're popcorn flicks, they're fun to watch it in some morbid reason, in some morbid fashion, I should say. But the stories are fucking terrible. It ends up becoming a glorified wrestling match type scenario, like a big wrestling angle. But the issue is neither studio or neither franchise wants their icon to look bad or to take the back seat. So you end up usually having, okay, this guy wins this round, this guy wins that round, and then there's some sort of a draw. Case in point, Kong versus Godzilla. Spoiler alert, they talk about this ancient rivalry that they've had to see who's the alpha beast, and it's winner take all, and then they betray all that at the end of the movie so they can team up against Mechagodzilla. And again, it's just bankrupt storytelling. It makes no sense and it's stupid. So that generally happens with these movies. And also, they have to explain all that. As I mentioned, the eons long rivalry between Kong and Godzilla that was conjured up for this movie as a justification for them to fight. Same thing would happen with Michael Myers and Jason. And there's some issues with that. Namely, explanation and exposition plays against Michael Myers' strengths. One of the reasons the Halloween series has been reset so many times is because in its original nature, the shape, Michael Myers, was vague. He was very vague. He was ethereal in nature. He was a supernatural force within a human vessel. He was really a mix of insanity and ancient evil of almost like a Lovecraftian type. And every attempt since that original movie to explain him or his nature or what he is or who he is has ended up with dead ends and essentially no story. So they have to reboot and re-rack everything every couple decades. The characters, in a way, are too similar. They're both the strong silent type. They're hard to kill. They do have issues with sex for different reasons, and I'll get into that in a minute. But their MO is different. They're very similar. They're too similar almost in who they are, and why they do what they do is so different that they really have no reason to meet. Do you see what I'm getting at here? It's just a forced It's a forced way to shove these characters together. And Michael, again, in his purest form, he does stalk teenage girls, and Jason stalks teenagers, but Michael's trying to recreate his slaying of Judith, his first kill. It's a warped, like, psychosexual experience. He's got a twisted, childlike sense of humor about it. He plays practical jokes, and there's cat and mouse games, and of course, the eventual, penetrating with the phallus. It's what it is. Just look at it for what it is, people. If you include Jamie Lloyd, here's another issue. Now you're continuing that plot that Blumhouse tried so hard to get rid of and get away from. The sibling plot, which that dilutes Michael even further too. So to me, just having to explain things to set up this movie is, first off, right off the bat, going to be detrimental to Michael Myers. Now looking at Jason, he kills camp counselors and teenagers to avenge his mom's death, who pretty much died trying to avenge his death. Now, he's hinted at being challenged early on in the series, although he shows his intelligence later on and develops some, he's not just, a developmentally delayed person who's misunderstanding things. He's an intelligent killer by the end of the franchise. So again, they both kill teenagers for completely different reasons, so I don't see any reason for them to come together in any sort of mutual, what two paths would cross to bring them together. Then the other issue is where you set the film. Do you set it at Camp Crystal Lake? Well, that's in New Jersey. So unless Michael's going to call an Uber, I don't really see him getting to Blairstown, New Jersey. On the other hand, if you hold it in Haddonfield, what the fuck is Jason doing in Haddonfield? They're Jason's woods. That's the whole point. And we know in some convoluted stories he went to New York, and we know how well that worked out. So there's no real easy path for these two to meet and to come together, or even any reason for them to fight. And you're going to have what you had with Freddy versus Jason. The first 20 to 30 minutes is going to be just trying to explain these stories and the reason they should be coming together. And then the other 30 or 40 minutes after that is going to be some forced, ham-fisted, trying to logistically cram them together and put them in the same spot. And then you're going to have a big, all-out fight to the finish without a real finish, with a fuck finish, as they call it in wrestling, for the next 30 to 40 minutes. So again, it's way too redundant with Corey Feldman and with Danielle Harris, and they're both playing similar characters, and the two killers are the same, but their MOs are different. So with all these characters, what the fuck would you do? And I may do an episode of Horror Reanimated, just like a video podcast style video for old time's sake, trying to give it the college try and put them together, but again, logistically, it would be terrible. So the film's likely not going to happen because Friday the 13th is in the middle of a rights battle right now with Victor Miller, the original writer, and Sean Cunningham, the producer. So nothing is going to get done on the Friday the 13th front as far as any movies are concerned. And let's be honest, Freddy vs. Jason left both franchises in a really terrible position. The movie itself made a shitload of money, but neither film, Freddy or Jason, neither franchise had another film for a decade, and they ended up being reboots that were really poorly received by fans. So you can make the argument that this would make a lot of money. But unfortunately, that was at the expense of both franchises. I don't want to see that happen to Friday the 13th, and I don't want to see that happen to Halloween, especially now that Blumhouse has resurrected the franchise, and it's $1 billion franchise. So I don't think they would want to run the risk of doing anything to harm this either, especially with Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends continuing this story that they rebooted a few years ago. It's $1 billion property for Blumhouse. So to me, there's no way that either camp is going to play ball with each other and see this really through. To me, the waters are way too treacherous to navigate to try to pull off a successful, creative, effective crossover that leaves both franchises looking better in return when all's said and done. And to me, that's the ultimate goal. If you do it, yeah, it could be good, and yeah, it could make a lot of money. But if it leaves you with damaged properties going forward, it's not worth doing. But even though I hate the idea of a crossover, I'm a fan at the end of the day. I would still be there opening night with a bag of peanut M&Ms or a box of popcorn in one hand and a cherry Coke in the other, and I'd be smiling just because I'd be glad to see another Friday the 13th or Halloween movie. And that's why they're going to continue to make these crossovers, because they know even if they're bad or creatively bankrupt, people are going to continue to go see them. Much like wrestling right now. Even as bad as it is, people love wrestling. As bad as this movie could be, people still love the characters and the medium, so they'll go see it, and it'll be a big spectacle. So, what can I say? I might do a video trying to really make sense of this, to try to do what, my version of a Michael versus Jason at some point. But I want to know what you think. Leave a comment down in the description. Blame Sam Hoyos if you think I'm full of shit. What do you think about my take? And would you enjoy this type of movie? And am I off base? Let me know. Go check out Sam's projects, Red River Podcast and Playing Dead, the band. And I'm out of time. I'm bshowbrian. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out of time.